Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for your generosity in this debate. Although it may have been a little hard to determine from the remarks from my immediate predecessor in this debate, the member for Hayes and Harlington, I join in the welcome for this debate by the member for Bristol North West and congratulate him on his opening remarks at the beginning of this debate, because he's right. There is a consensus across this House that we all want to see COP26 as a hugely successful conference, not just for the UK, but for the whole world, to set us on a path to zero emissions by 2050. An ambition which was set out some time ago, and the objectives for the COP26 series of discussions, which of course were due to have taken place last year had it not been for COVID, were actually set at Paris 5 years before. And it's worth reminding ourselves, I think, at the outset of my remarks, about the four particular commitments which were set for this coming conference. The first was to enhance governments' nationally determined contributions. And this will be the first time since Paris that they will have been ratcheted up. The second was to invite long-term strategies to be provided by each country to give a pathway to decarbonisation by 2050. And where I do agree with the honourable gentleman from Hayes and Harlington, it is beholden on the government to be able to set out clarity over the path to 2050, not just the target. The third commitment was to do with finance. There was $100 billion mobilised per annum for the poorest countries to help them green their economies and to adapt to the impact of climate change. So we need to see how that's going to be delivered when we get to Glasgow. And finally, there was the issue of the rule book on rules for a global carbon market to avoid double counting and to set the standards. And here I think the UK has got a great deal of opportunity to show the famed global leadership, which this conference, as it is going to be the largest held ever in this country in terms of number of countries participating, and hopefully most of them will be able to be here in some form or another in person. It is a real opportunity for the nation to lead the world and for the Prime Minister to put his stamp on the future. So as the UK host is acting as host country with Italy, as has been said, we will act as a neutral arbiter in these negotiations. And we need to ensure that every country, every Paris signatory at least, is supported in bringing forward their updated nationally determined contributions. At the beginning of the Paris conference, 186 of the 196 parties attending had presented their nationally determined contribution. Now, I know progress has been made, but we've got a long way to go to be able to achieve matching the performance that France had when they were hosting the last of these COP series of conferences. The UK announced its contribution of 68% of net zero emissions against the 1990 benchmark last December, and several other countries have set out high-profile ambitions since, including China, Japan, and South Korea, looking to get to net zero by mid-20th century, and some presenting nearer-term targets ahead of COP26. But we still have to see progress from some major economies, including Russia, Brazil, Australia, and I know the US are now going to be joining, but we need to see where that gets to too. And I hope perhaps the COP president can update us on his discussions with President Biden's special envoy, John Kerry, who was in the UK very recently. I'd like to touch on two other aspects during my remarks. One is, how does Parliament engage in scrutinising progress? Well, the Environmental Audit Committee, in common with other committees, as we've heard, have undertaken various sessions in relation to COP26. The first was a year ago when we engaged with stakeholders who were previously involved with previous COPs to establish what the government's preparations needed to focus on. We then had a session with Nigel Topping and Fiona Reynolds in May last year on the role for finance in leading the way for the upcoming COP. And we also questioned Christiana Figueres, the former executive secretary of the UN Convention last year. And we also questioned the president, who was then president designate, my right honourable friend, in September last year. 9 select committees have locus in relation to this issue, and we have all agreed as 9 committees to work together in scrutinising the UK government preparations. And we are, as the Environmental Audit Committee, leading the first of these scrutiny sessions on cross-government arrangements and the machinery of government tomorrow morning. And I'm very pleased that my right honourable friend, the member for Reading West, will be attending with 2 of his senior officials. The eyes of the world will be on us to make a credible success of COP. And the challenge is across many areas. We need to use the national events that we have to demonstrate UK leadership. The UK has met the first and second carbon budgets and has already reduced emissions below the level expected in the third carbon budget up to 22. But as is widely acknowledged, we are not on track to meet either the 4th or 5th carbon budgets, which were legislated for on the basis of an 80% cut in emissions using the 1990 baseline by 2050, rather than the more ambitious net zero target that we now have in legislation. So a major ramp up is needed, as is acknowledged by the Committee on Climate Change, to achieve this. And the UK will have to make more progress. While it's been succeeding in the power sector, emissions are either not falling or not falling fast enough across transport, agriculture, housing, and industry. Bringing forward the petrol diesel car ban is welcome, but it's not the only measure that the government has to take